What inspired you to get into this whole world of climate science and exposing the agenda, narrative, and opposing all these things?
Yeah, I was sort of just a normie a long time ago. As of like 2005 or so, I tended to just believe what the TV told me. But then I got involved in this thing about the Ivory-Billed woodpecker, where there was a peer-reviewed study with 17 people saying that they had rediscovered this woodpecker. But I checked into it as a bird watcher, and the evidence was a complete crock. They had no real evidence to back it up. So that made me think that peer-reviewed studies aren't necessarily true. And right about that time, somebody emailed me and said, hey, you should check into the global warming thing because it's the same deal. If you look into the evidence for yourself, you find out that there's really nothing that backs it up.
But why are we told again and again that man-made climate chaos is an undisputed scientific fact, beyond question, beyond doubt? To answer this, we must examine the so-called consensus on climate change.
Thank you very much.
Until the 1980s, global warming was little more than an eccentric scare story put about by radical environmentalists. But then the cause was picked up by an ambitious young senator, Al Gore, who would soon become vice president. $1 billion a year of public money was made available for research into climate change. This quickly rose to $2 billion.
Up to that level.
Academic researchers in various disciplines began to apply for this climate funding.
If you want to qualify for money that's labeled climate, well, you take whatever you're doing and you add a little bit of climate speak to it, and away you go.
You're dealing with the sexual habits of cockroaches. You'll add, and the impact of climate.
So all I have to do is add a little wrinkle to my grant application to explain how, well, I'm worried that climate change will mean the death of all the maple trees. And so right away you qualify for funding.
Academics of every kind lined up for climate funding. Climate became an exciting new area of interest for sociologists, biologists, professors of English literature, lecturers in gender studies, and many more.
And it also served to create a community. I mean, you know, you've become a climate scientist now, even though you know nothing about the physics of climate.
Thousands of papers were published on climate change and prostitution, climate change and beer, climate change and the Black Death, climate change and disability, climate change and video games, and everything else imaginable.
There's an almost comical list of studies out there. Just do a Google search on climate change and everything comes up.
Few of these papers ever questioned whether climate change was actually true.
After you've done the research and you write the paper up, sometimes you find there's no effect at all from climate, but you still have to say in your papers, oh yes, climate change is real, and we just need to study this some more.
Since so few of these so-called climate studies challenged the idea of climate change, it was declared that there was a scientific consensus. Climate change must be true. Climate also became a new focus for government-funded research bodies.
Scientific research in the United States tends to be dominantly funded by government grants. And so whatever government grants are offered sort of determine much of the science being done.
It was during the Cold War that many government research bodies were set up. But the end of the Cold War and pressure on government spending has left many of them struggling to justify their continued funding.
United States Congress only funds problems, okay? Research into problems, whether it's money that goes to NASA or NOAA or National Science Foundation or Department of Energy or any other alphabet soup, organization.
It's always been a problem to support your research or your existence, or raison d'etre. And so climate was a godsend.
If Congress is willing to pay you to find evidence of global warming, by golly, as a scientist, we're going to go find evidence of it, because that's what we're being paid to do. And guess what? If you don't find evidence or say the evidence suggests it's not a problem, your funding ends. This totally corrupts the way we look at the science.
Who was the famous gangster asked, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Well, because that's where the money is."
climate alarm brought funds. And the bigger the supposed threat, the more funds seemed to flow. The publicly funded science establishment now had a direct financial interest in playing up the alarm.
So there's a huge incentive to over-exaggerate or to speak in hyperbole, even if the data doesn't support exactly what you're saying, because that's what brings the funds. I was in that boat. I was someone that was defending climate change as a grad student quite a bit, because the truth is I didn't give it too much thought, but I thought, well, it's getting a ton of attention. It brings a ton of money into the earth sciences. Even if I don't buy all the hyperbole, what's the problem?
By the late 1990s, what had started as an environmental scare story was gaining momentum.
Here's UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres talking about sea level rises.
Low-lying communities and entire countries could disappear forever. We would witness a mass exodus of entire populations on a biblical scale.
Obviously, this $43 million beach house will disappear forever when climate change goes biblical. So question 1, what denier owns it? Bill Gates. Strangely, Bill is the author of How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. So what, he would deny the climate narrative? I wonder why he does that. The denier that bought this place installed propane tanks to store 2,500 gallons of fossil fuels, so they don't have to use zero carbon power. Hint, this Atlantic Coast property was in the news in 2023. What climate change denier owns it? Barack Obama. This is Martha's Vineyard. This other view gives a better look at the ocean. The propane generators were classy, since green energy wind turbines would ruin the view. And who built this death trap on the edge of the Pacific with a controversial concrete barrier that's supposed to be bad for the environment? Barack Obama? Oh, that can't be right. The choices and the answer are the same. I must have read one of the scripts twice. Because he'd need a private jet to go from his house in Hawaii to the one in the Atlantic Ocean. Question 4. Our next villain denies sea level rise so much that after he sold this oceanfront home, he moved into this one. John Kerry, who was Joe Biden's special climate envoy. He moved from this beachfront in Nantucket to beachfront in Martha's Vineyard. A fan of the Great Reset, he was advocating for cutting food production to lower GHG emissions, but never felt guilty about flying in his wife's private jet. Question 5 brings us back to Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who also owns a British football team and a $500 million super yacht with a diesel gas tank of about 150,000 gallons. Famously, he once lent his yacht to a friend to go to World Cup soccer matches in Brazil. The friend was another climate change denier who also owns oceanfront properties and isn't afraid to burn tons of CO2 per hour. The friend was Leonardo DiCaprio, who's also a United Nations ambassador for climate change. It's his greatest acting role, as in real life he's a big climate change denier into private jets, yachts, and beachfront land.
There's no such thing as settled science, especially climate.